I'm Ryan.
And I'm Zach.
And together, we are functionally literate.
We like to think so. Maybe we're actually not. You ever consider that? It's like we're already pretty self-deprecating. We're like, we're functionally literate. Are we wrong about that too, though?
Oh, God.
Are we dumber than even we think?
I have a story to tell.
I think that sometimes. I'll just be laying in bed and it's like, am I an idiot? Am I actually, like, do people around me just sort of suffer smilingly and they're just like, poor guy.
Well, your
really
wife certainly
best.
doesn't think much about the title.
Well, she's a very well-read individual, so that's not fair.
Oh, God. It was just so funny when you told me that. One day you told me that your wife asked you, what's the name of your podcast called? And you said, Functionally Literate. And she said, barely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and she'll make fun of me because we like to read out loud to each other sometimes. So, like,
a lot
of couples, like, you'll lay in bed and you'll read before you go to bed.
Sure.
Instead of her and I reading separate books, we'll pick a book and then one of us will just read a chapter out loud.
I love that.
So we both sort of follow along. And she struggles far less than I do with the pronunciation of some words. And so sometimes I'll stumble over a word, and like in my mind, obviously I'm comprehending it just fine. But when I translate that into speech, it doesn't work as well. And so she'll just give me a hard time about it sometimes.
So this was she was just being savage.
Yeah. Like sometimes she'll just be like, do you need to follow along with your finger? And I'm like, shut up! I'm doing fine.
So I have a story to tell about the title of our podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple weeks ago, so for posterity, we are now at the point where episodes that we've recorded before we started releasing are now out, and we're recording new episodes. That's where we're at now.
It's a good feeling in production.
It is a good feeling. We've got 2 episodes out, so the Greek episodes are out. I think they're great. And I've gotten pretty good feedback from, friends and close acquaintances. I don't know about you.
The only feedback I've gotten is my own, and I think they're fantastic.
Yeah. It's out in a lot of places. It's on Google Podcasts. It's on that Samsung free app. You can listen to it on there. Stitcher, radio,
Spotify.
Spotify, of course.
Yeah,
it's hosted on Spotify.
Gotta be a Spotify.
It's not on radio. It's on, I forget what it's called. Anyways. Theoretically, I want one of you to test this and report back to me. You can tell Alexa to play Functionally Literate, and it will do it.
I don't have an Alexa.
I don't either. So
somebody with an Alexa,
please. I'm curious to know if Alexa will listen and do it.
Yeah, if it actually comes up, that'd be cool.
So, anyways, my story about telling this. I've mentioned in our introduction, I go to a Unitarian Universalist church. One of the traditions at every service is the tradition of stones and water. So basically, everyone goes up to the front, takes a stone, and they're all like very different variety of stones. And you infuse in the stone all of your hopes, joys, or sorrows, and put it in this large glass fishbowl full of water. And it's communal water. Annually, we have a water ceremony where we, re-enrich the water that we use for this ceremony every year. And you also have the option to go to the back of the sanctuary and fill out a little slip to where you can share a joy or a sorrow or a prayer. And so this was the week that I released our first episode. So I was stoked, and I wanted to share that with the church. So I wrote out on a slip of paper, I'm so excited, to announce that I've after a year of work, I put out my first episode of my book club podcast, Functionally Literate. Our intern minister, his name is George, he was reading them out that day, and he stumbled on the word literate. They didn't write it well enough.
Yeah.
So he was reading, the slip of paper. It's like, Ryan Carter says, I'm excited to announce that after a year of work, I have released the first episode of my podcast, Functional, and then he turns to our minister, Molly, and he's like, I can't read this. And he's like, Ryan, help me out here. And I just call out, literate! He's like, literate? Literate! Functionally literate. It is, and then everybody laughs.
Yeah.
The
irony is good.
And he was so apologetic about it. And people talked to me about it afterwards. And I said to him, and I said to everybody else, I cannot think of a better way to announce this specific podcast
than to stumble over the word literate itself. And it's like, I am bad enough, my handwriting messed up that word. Because that proves the point, really.
It really
But
does.
then also, you stumbling over the word just made it 10 times better.
It really did. It really did. So, George, if you're listening, don't feel bad. I think it's funny.
I think that's great. That's funny.
So, anyways, this week, we are covering Morte d'Arthur. So, if you've been following along, paying attention, Morte d'Arthur is composed of 21 books, stories. They're very short books.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they were all kind of bound together at some point. So we've covered book 1, which was the story of Arthur and how he became king and the sword and the stone, and he had a battle with like 11 kings and, well, there's 10 kings and a duke, but,
Who's counting?
But yeah, book 2 is the story of Balin, the knight with the 2 swords. And I gotta tell you, if you thought the first story was nuts, this one's even more nuts.
It's hard to follow sometimes.
It is.
What is happening?
I took more notes on this one than the first one, and this had fewer chapters.
Yeah. This is... Le Morte d'Arthur is a tough text to analyze in what I'll call manageable chunks, which is essentially what you have to do for this sort of podcast form. Is I can't spend 6 hours tearing apart one paragraph, because you could do that with Le Morte d'Arthur.
Yeah.
So much of these stories are so heavily influenced by like the Welsh Celtic myths out of which they sort of sprung. A lot of the source material was Celtic myth throughout the British Isles, but then infused with Christianity.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of background information, and
also that's
layered and
not
nuanced.
even taking into account the fact that all of these stories went to France.
Yeah, and then came back.
And then they came back.
It's just the story of Lancelot. It's just how it went to France, came from France, and you're just like, I'm confused about what's happening. Is it from France? Is it in France? I don't know what's going on.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's very tough. So in reading the story, I basically had to just shut my brain off and just read the surface level of what was happening at first. Because every sentence I'd get so bogged down and like, well, what does that mean? That could, that's a reference to something else, and that could mean this or this, and then later in the story, I'd be like, oh, that's going to color how that works.
I found myself wondering the same thing. I think I even know specifically one of the things you're talking about, but we're going to get into it. So I thought we would start doing something fun with the blurbs. So a year ago, Jake made a sound that I could have used for our intro.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it for our intro, but I think it's going to be perfect for this. So what I'm going to start doing from now on is we're going to lead in with one of the chapter blurbs, and we're going to put this music as an undertone to it.
Okay. That sounds fun.
So, chapter 1. Of a damsel which came girt with a sword, for to find a man of such virtue to draw it out of the scalp. So, a knight came to King Arthur and told him that this king, King Rience of North Wales.
Yeah. Those damn Welsh.
Yeah, so a knight came to him and said that King Rience had reared a great number of people, and entered his lands, and burnt and slain a number of Arthur's people.
Well, that's just no good. You know, like you can't. We discussed bullying before. This is classic bullying. Just trying to bully Arthur.
Can't bully Arthur.
I mean, it's not really a good idea.
No, because Arthur said, if this be true, it were great shame unto mine estates, but that he were mightily withstood. I don't know what that means.
That means we gotta fight him back.
We gotta fight him.
Yeah, we can't. Sure. We can't let him do that.
So the knight says, it is truth, for I saw the host myself. So King Arthur, at this point, decides the most sensible thing to do is to call on his lords, his knights, and gentlemen of arms to Camelot for council general, which I looked this up because I was confused by what that meant. Basically, he just wanted to get his people together for advice.
Yeah, get some opinions. What do you guys think? What should we do?
And, while you're here, let's joust.
Well, as one does. Look, you don't get your rugby team together for advice and not play rugby.
It's Camelot's favorite pastime.
It's the only pastime, really. What else is going on? I guess you can go falcon.
Nothing.
You can do some falconry.
Yeah, maybe. So soon after everyone assembled and lodged, a damsel arrived and went to Arthur, and she came to Arthur with a message from the great lady Lyle, that's Lile, of Avelion, Avelion. So
it's like Avalon, but it's not quite Avalon.
Right, that's why it threw me off. Avelion.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
I mean, that
could just be an alternate spelling.
So she said she came with a message from the great lady Lyle.
The lady of the lake.
And so for context, this damsel, that's the lady of the lake?
Mm-hmm. This currently is not. This woman is not the lady of the lake. She is sent by the lady of the lake.
So then that confuses me for reasons we're going to get into later.
Yeah, it's still confusing. It won't make any more sense.
So this woman, she arrived in this like richly furred mantle, which is like a loose, sleeveless cloak. Mm-hmm. Women usually wear it.
Yeah,
in this
very, very fancy.
She just casts that off, and on this damsel's waist was a sword.
Behold.
And so the king
am girt with weapons.
Yeah, I am girt with weapon. So Arthur sees this, and he's looking at her, and he's like, damsel, for what cause are ye girt with that sword? It beseemeth you not.
Yeah, in my version it says, it does not become one of your gender to wear this sword. Which, you gotta take that into account. That would have been strange.
It is strange.
You'd be like, why does this woman have a sword?
Women don't wear swords.
That's, like, what are you gonna do with that?
What do you don't sword fight.
Right,
You're a
Joan
woman.
of Arc is centuries away.
Yeah.
That ain't happening yet.
So the damsel says, she says, now shall I tell you, this sword that I am girt withal doth me great sorrow and cumbrance, for I may not be delivered of this sword but by a knight. But he must be a passing good man of his hands and of his deeds, and without villainy or treachery, and without treason. And if I may find such a knight that hath all these virtues, he may draw out this sword out of the sheath, for I have been at King Rience's, where it was told to me there were passing good knights, and he and all his knights have attempted it, and none can speed. So, speed meaning none can draw the sword.
Yeah.
So she's been around. She's been trying to get people to draw this sword.
Well, and what I find interesting is that it was specifically the new enemy of Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story starts with this, like, there's a new bad guy.
Yeah.
It's this other king from North Wales. He's causing problems.
Yeah.
Immediately a woman shows up and says, hey, I need some help. And I've been to that guy, and he ain't shit.
Yeah.
And none of his knights are either.
No.
They're all garbage.
All of them be treacherous and villainy.
Right.
Villainous.
And so it really helps draw the distinction between, like, it's not just that he's opposing Arthur and that's why he's bad. It's like, here's this sort of magical proof
Here's this magic sword
that they're all bad.
Yeah. The sword
now later
says they're bad.
Now later when they all die, we don't feel bad for them because they were all terrible people. But it also firmly puts King Arthur like in the just side of that conflict.
Yeah.
Which is only of passing importance. But what I find interesting is that Arthur tries.
He does.
And he pulled the sword out of the stone. He's like, this is old, I'm an old hat.
So
this is what I do.
So what he says before he does it, he's like, this is a great marvel. If this be so, I will myself attempt to draw out the sword, not presuming upon myself that I am the best knight, but that I will begin to draw out your sword in giving example to all the barons, that they shall every one of them attempt it after I have.
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing, is that he's like, I'm going to do it.
I'm going to lead by example.
But I don't think that I will.
I already have a sword.
He's like, I'm not convinced that I'll be able, which is, I would say, nobly humble of him.
Yeah.
Because you would think, he's like, I've fucking done this before.
I drew the sword from the stone, man. I'm the king of all of my lands.
I am the God-crowned rightful king of all of England.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I be able to draw that sword?
He's like, I don't know, man.
But,
maybe I've got some treachery in me.
Right. But he has the wherewithal and the humility to go, it's probably not me. But I'm going to try. One, because I'd like to help. But two, because then everyone else will feel obligated to also try.
Yeah. So,
and then it doesn't work.
So he grabs the sword by the sheath and he tries to pull it out. He gives a really powerful tug. Wouldn't come out. The damsel's annoyed by this. She's like, "Sir, you need not to pull half so hard, for he that shall pull it out shall do it with little might."
Yeah, he's like, yo, chill out, bro. Like, if you're gonna pull it, you'd pull it. Like, it's not, you don't gotta work so hard.
Arthur's like, "Ye say well. Now I say ye all, my barons, but beware ye not be words. But beware ye be not defiled with shame, treachery, nor guile." So I think what he's saying is, don't be afraid that you can't pull the sword. Just try.
Yeah. It's like, don't overly concern yourself if you think you're treacherous. Just try. Because it's not like Arthur knew he was the fucking king when he yanked the sword out either.
Yeah.
He just kind of did it and was like, oh, shit. I mean, like, don't preoccupy yourself.
I mean, it didn't even occur to him that he couldn't draw that sword.
Well, no, because he didn't even know what the
He didn't even know what the fuck it was. He didn't read the inscription.
Yeah.
And nobody bothered to explain it to him.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh yeah, no, Kay needs a sword. Anyways.
Right. So all these guys try. Or no, they don't try.
Most of them, but not all of them.
Yeah, some of them are
I guess
shamed.
some didn't feel confident. They lacked villainy.
I mean, I don't blame them. If I'm a knight in King Arthur's court, and I'm like, King Arthur's like the shit, bro. Like, he's good. This is the guy.
Yeah.
Right? He pulled the sword out of the stone. And then he, in front of me, fails.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna sit there and go, I'm not better than King Arthur. Like,
right.
That's
right.
If he can't fucking do it, I'm not
the
High King of England. This is gonna be me.
So yeah, none were successful. The ones that did try.
Yeah.
None of them were successful.
Gotta be pretty disappointing for the lady.
Yeah, she said, "Alas, I weened in this court and had been the best knights without treachery or treason." So she was saying, like, I hoped that someone here would have been able to pull the sword, and Arthur's like, "By my faith, here are good knights, as I deem, as any be in the world, but their grace is not to help you, wherefore I am displeased." It's like, damn, sorry, none of my knights can help you.
I really wanted them to. These are the best knights I know.
Chapter 2. How Balin, arrayed like a poor knight, pulled out the sword, which afterward was the cause of his death.
So interestingly, Balin had just been released from prison.
Yeah.
I believe it was 6 months prior. There had been a jousting match between him and Arthur's cousin, where he had killed Arthur's cousin, and in his anger, Arthur imprisoned him. Now, the implication there is that it wasn't necessarily quite fair of a jousting match. It was unnecessary to kill him. It was due to some negligence on Balin's part. The point is, he deserved the punishment for the thing.
I'm really confused about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just 6 months? You killed his cousin.
Well, sure, but you don't serve the same sentence for murder and manslaughter. If it wasn't intentional, if it was a matter of negligence, then it's like, well, some punishment is necessary, but we're not going to execute you because you didn't mean to.
I don't know, man. The narrative doesn't focus on that.
It doesn't. It seems irrelevant. What is relevant is that he was in prison, which colors him as like the least likely person to actually succeed in pulling the sword. Now, what I also think interesting is that they focus on the fact that he's dressed impoverished.
Yeah, he's very poor looking.
Which is another distinction. Like, he's not in nice clothes.
No.
He's not in armor.
No.
He's not, visually speaking right now, he is not a knight.
No. I mean,
he's just a prisoner.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't look like a knight at all at the moment.
No. He's arguably not as noble as the others because they haven't served jail time. But Balin has.
So, the barons released him from prison, for he was a good man named of his body, and he was born in Northumberland. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but that's why they released it.
They're just saying he was a good dude.
He's a good guy.
From Northumberland?
From Northumberland.
Yeah.
I genuinely, I don't understand why it was just 6 months. I don't understand why Arthur didn't kill him. I guess because, it's Arthur's MO to be forgiving people. So
he tries to be a merciful king.
So slap on the wrist. Dungeons in the 6 months for you. How dare you kill my cousin, dick. Balin was released, and he happened to be in King Arthur's court at the time that this damsel came in, and he wasn't really sure what was going on. He asked a knight, and the knight told him, and it excited him. He wanted to try pulling the sword. But, as you said, he was poorly dressed. But he wanted to try, assuming they would let him.
Yeah.
So, the damsel's going to leave. And Balin approaches her, and he says, "Damsel, I pray you, of your courtesy, suffer me as well to try as these lords did. Though that I be so poorly clothed, in my heart me seemeth," which means it seems to me, "me seemeth I am fully assured as some of these others, and me seemeth in my heart to speed right well." So I'm guessing here he's trying to say, like, there's no reason I shouldn't try.
Yeah, he's basically saying, I know I look like I shouldn't be able to do it. But I am as noble as any of those guys that did try, so I have as good a chance as them.
The damsel's uncertain of this.
I would be too.
But she's looking at him, and she reasons, he looks so poor. This guy can't be treacherous or villainous.
Right. He hasn't had the opportunity.
Right. So she's like, "Sir, I don't need to put you through more pain and labor. It doesn't look to me like you would succeed where others have failed." And then Balin says, "Ah, fair damsel, worthiness and good tatches and good deeds are not only in arrayment, but manhood and worship is hid within man's person. And many a worshipful knight is not known unto all people, and therefore worship and hardiness is not in arraignment."
Don't judge the book by its cover. That's essentially, I know I don't look fancy.
That's what I put here. But, I think it was saying, looks can be deceiving, is what he was trying to say. And so the damsel's like, "By God, you say sooth. Therefore ye shall essay to do what ye may." She's like, "All right, fine.
I'll let you try."
So Balin pulls the sword from the sheath easily. And he looked at it, and it pleased him. And then the king and the barons, they all marveled that Balin was successful.
A lot of oohs and ahs.
Many sneered, though.
Yeah, in my book it says, and many were jealous. They felt a little slighted. How dare this prisoner just released be the knight of unmatched courage and worth when they couldn't do it.
Yeah. And so, the damsel's like, "In truth, this is a passing good knight, and the best that I ever found, and the most of worship, without treason, treachery, or villainy, and many marvels shall he do. Now, gentle and courteous knight, give me back the sword." And Balin says, "Nay, I will keep this sword unless it's taken by force."
And thus begins the slow downhill.
The damsel says, "Well, you're not wise to keep that sword from me. If you keep it, you shall slay your best friend and the man you love most in the world. That sword shall be your destruction. And Balin's like, I'll take that chance.
Yeah. Yeah, he basically says, I'd rather take my chances than give the sword back.
She's like, you'll regret it.
Now, see, this is the point. This is one of the spots where I got stuck with how deep this symbolism could go.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is sort of a mirror of Arthur drawing the sword out of the stone.
How so?
Well, it's a sword that nobody else could draw.
True.
And it's a sword that anoints the knight that draws it as something.
Mm-hmm.
Arthur became king, Balin becomes this peerless knight. Or at the very, they don't become it necessarily, but they're recognized as such. Balin was already the thing he was.
Yeah, this damsel said so, and he was the only one that could pull the sword from the sheath, so it must be true.
Right, just like Arthur was always the High King, rightfully, but nobody knew it until he draws the sword out of the stone. But then you get into, well, what does that mean? What is the significance that they were the only ones that could do that? What's the parallel between them? And what is the significance of the fact that Arthur drew it out of a stone in a church, and that Balin drew it off of the waist of a woman?
In King Arthur's court, no less.
Right. Because they both came from, Arthur wasn't necessarily a prisoner in rags, but he was a squire to a lower knight.
I wonder if the answer to this question is even in this story, for reasons that I'll get into at the end.
It might not be, but this was one of the points where I sort of got stuck, mostly in the difference of symbolism of a rock, a symbol of, stability and the earth, sort of the natural order, in a church, the house of God, and a noble woman from a magical land. What are those differences? Because King Arthur gets the sword, which presumably is a symbol of authority, achievement, something like that, power. But he gets it from God and the earth. It's sort of the natural rule of God. But then Balin's drawing it from a woman, specifically a maiden, and a noble woman.
And she's very clear, listen, you gotta give me that sword back. And he's like, I'm not listening to you.
And so it's this idea of so Balin's getting his power from femininity.
Yeah.
But the difference is, when Arthur was told, put the sword back to prove it was really yours, he does it. And he does it dozens of times.
Yeah.
Balin is asked,
he does.
Put it back, and he says no.
No. That's my sword now.
Right.
I like this sword.
And so this sort of difference is that Arthur isn't preoccupied with holding on to that power because he knows it's his. He can do it as many times as he wants, and he'll just keep doing it because he knows that he's confident that it will be his. So
you're alleging that Balin isn't?
Balin is not confident, which is why he won't give it back.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Okay.
And that sort of shows the difference between King Arthur and Balin and why there's that distinction.
So this damsel, she's like, it's a shame you're not going to listen to me. It's a shame that you don't believe that sword's going to be your destruction. It's a great pity.
Yeah. Well, and that's the punishment. That's what happens when you hold on to that power instead of resting confidently in that it's naturally yours.
And so the damsel, she left.
Yeah.
And King Arthur's like, I suppose you will not depart so lightly from this fellowship. I suppose you are displeased that I have shown you unkindness. He says this to Balin. Don't blame me so harshly, for I was misinformed against you, and I thought ye had not been such a knight as ye are, of worship and prowess. And if you will abide in this court among my fellowship, I shall so advance you as ye shall be pleased. So he's saying he wants Balin to be a knight of the Round Table. It's like, hey, good job, you were able to draw this sword, I'm sorry I imprisoned you. You killed my cousin, whatever.
Yeah, so in the one I'd read, it came out more as like Arthur, with this evidence that obviously Balin is this courageous and brave knight.
Yeah.
Apologizes for imprisoning him.
Yeah.
Says, I was sorry, I'm sorry, I was wrong to do that, as I now see. Because if you were justly imprisoned, there's no way you would have been able to draw that.
Yeah.
So I must have been misinformed.
Yeah.
I thought you were not a courageous and honorable knight, and clearly you are.
That's a probably more accurate interpretation of that.
Yeah, and so he's sort of seeing in retrospect, I was wrong about you. And in my version, it specifically says he'll advance him into the barony. He's like, I will make you a baron.
Oh, okay.
If you stay, I'd like you to be a lord in my realm. And Balin
declines.
He says,
God thank your highness. Your bounty and highness may no man praise half to the value. But at this time I must needs depart, beseeching you alway of your good grace. Not always, all way. Mm-hmm. No S.
Yeah. So he says, thank you, but no.
Yeah.
And because he doesn't feel worthy, he's like, I don't belong here. This is for better people than me. I have to go.
And Arthur says, truly I am wroth for your departing. I pray you, fair knight, that ye tarry not long, and ye shall be right welcome to me and to my barons, and I shall amend all wrongs that I have done against you. So he's
come back as soon as you can.
He's like, I'm mad that you're leaving. Please come back soon. Yeah. And Balin's like, God thank your great lordship. And he leaves. Yeah. And as he left, many knights of the Round Table said that Balin did not pull the sword from the sheath by virtue, but by witchcraft.
Yes, so now this is the jealous people going, I don't think you fucking earned it, man. Witchcraft. And this is another consequence of the fact that he wouldn't put it back. Because if you put it back, much like what happened when Arthur put it back, you get more witnesses that you pulled it.
Yeah.
You get more opportunities to show, I'm not tricking you. This isn't some illusion. Yeah. I'm actually just pulling the sword.
Yeah. So now that leads into chapter 3. How the Lady of the Lake demanded the knight's head that had won the sword, or the maiden's head. So yeah, Balin started to leave, and then the Lady of the Lake, she comes into the court. So now you said the Lady Lyle is the Lady of the Lake?
Yes.
I did not realize that.
That is my understanding.
Okay. So
if I am wrong, I apologize.
So this woman, the Lady of the Lake, sent the damsel.
That is what the damsel claims.
The damsel claims.
She said, I was sent by the Lady of the Lake.
I think it's safe to assume that this claim is not fully accurate, given what the Lady of the Lake does when she's here.
Correct.
Because
it seems to have been a deception of some kind.
Because she comes in here, and she is looking lovely as always.
Lady of the Lake.
She salutes King Arthur, and she tells him, hey, I came in to cash that IOU. Remember Excalibur? Gave you Excalibur?
Yeah, and I made you promise me a blank check favor at any point in the future that you have to do.
Well, that's not actually quite how the conversation went.
Well.
She said that she came in, she's like, hey, you owe me a favor, remember? And he's like, that is true. I did promise you a gift, but I have forgotten the name of my sword that you gave me. And she says, the name of it is Excalibur, which means cut steel.
Yeah, so this is really...
How the hell do you forget the name of your sword?
The way I read this was Arthur was testing her to make sure it really was the Lady of the Lake.
Okay.
And so she's like, I'm the Lady of the Lake and you owe me a favor. Now, before you cash in any favor to just any woman that rides up to you and says, I'm the one that gave you the sword, you go, what was the name of the sword then? And she goes, Excalibur. Goes, all right, that checks out. She would know.
I like that.
Presumably someone else pretending to be her would not know the name of the sword.
I prefer that interpretation over...
To Arthur being a silly idiot that just forgot the name of his magic sword.
Yeah, because that is how I took it when I read it.
No, I think he was testing it.
So Arthur says, ask what you will, and you shall have it, if it lie in my power to give it. And the lady says, I ask the head of the knight that have won the sword, or else the damsel's head that brought it. I won't kill them myself, but I shall have both their heads. For Balin slew my brother, a good and true knight, and that gentle woman was the cause of my father's death. So they got some drama going on.
Yeah, there's
I don't
some
know the
backstory
context, but there's some shit.
I think it comes out later in the story, but there's this sort of family feud between Balin's family and the family of the Lady of the Lake, which is why the brother is now dead.
Yeah.
Now what's interesting is she's accusing Balin of being this awful guy, and yet he was able to draw that sword. So we can presume that it's not wholly true.
Yeah.
It's true that he killed her brother, but it really makes it seem like her brother was probably the one in the wrong here.
I don't know if I buy that whoever draws the sword is free of villainy. I'm not sure I believe that premise.
Well, sure, and you're given a lot of reason to doubt it.
I am.
In the story to come.
I am.
But what I find Arthur's response interesting.
He says, "Truly, I may not grant neither of their heads with my worship. Therefore, ask what else you would of me, and I shall fulfill your desire." So he's basically saying, like, hey, listen, God says no. I can't do that.
Yeah, he says, I'm a Christian king. I can't just murder people
Thou
because
shalt
you
not
want.
kill.
Right. So the reason I find this interesting is because this is really a collection of like Welsh legends mixed with some historical fact, mixed with the influence of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so this to me seems a pretty clear example of when Christianity gets mixed in, but it provides a good narrative element where it's like the Lady of the Lake sort of represents like the pagan magic.
Yeah.
You know, she lives in the lake.
She's a fairy, right?
Yeah. She granted the magic sword, sort of the power of the kingdom.
Yeah.
But, and this is the reason it's interesting that I didn't understand this before reading the story, is the sword that Arthur draws out of the stone is not Excalibur.
Yeah.
Because the sword that grants him rightful ruler, kingship of the realm in the house of God is not the magic sword given to him by the pagan.
Despite the fact that the narrative goofs at one point in book 1.
Yes. And it makes it seem like it is. And so, and I think that's typically just an effect of the Christianization, is because they're like, well, it has to come from God.
Yeah.
And so the sword is in the church. It can't be the pagan magic sword. It has to be a different one.
Yeah.
And now he's given this pagan magic sword, and this pagan woman is like, hey, I gave you said pagan magic sword. I need you to do this favor.
You owe me to cash in this favor. And he's like, I can't do that. What else
and so Arthur says, well, the rules of God transcend the rules of the pagan witch. So I do owe you said favor for pagan magic sword. But God trumps that.
Well,
so I can't do it.
She doesn't give a fuck.
Well, of course not.
She's like, no,
I want no. You made the damn favor. Do the thing.
So, now, this is where Balin comes into the picture.
He hasn't quite left. He's been getting ready to leave. He's got a squire. He's getting the horse all ready, getting the tackle on.
But then he sees her.
Right.
These two, as we've established, had a history.
They have a sordid past.
Because of the Lady of the Lake, Balin's mother had been slain, and he's been looking for her for 3 years. And so he asks a knight what the hell she's doing in the court. And the knight conveyed everything that I just told you guys.
Yeah.
And
she actually wants to cut your head off.
And so he's mad. You know, when he found out that she was there for that, he just goes straight to her and he says, "Evil be you found. Ye would have my head, and therefore ye shall lose yours." And then he cuts her head off. Just straight up.
Smote thee.
And Arthur's like, dude, the fuck?
Yeah, he's not happy.
Hi, this is Functionally Literate. Hope you've been enjoying listening. This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show. I'm Ryan. I'm broke. If you could donate a little money my way with a sponsorship or a product, like, I'll be a shill for money. And I'm going to use that money with which to buy books, because let me tell you, right now I'm checking stuff out of the library, and it's rough. You can email me at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is FUNC.LIT.POD@gmail.com. You could also be a patron of this podcast. That's right. This podcast, Functionally Literate, we're going places. We have a Patreon now. You can give me $1. And in exchange, you will be able to listen to this podcast ad-free. That means right now, you don't have to listen to this bit. You can listen to the podcast uninterrupted. It just goes without me going on about things that you don't care about. Just for $1. And that will increase in value
every 2 weeks because there will be another ad-free episode. Additionally, if you'd like to just pitch a little money my way, like you're not interested in being a patron, you can go to my PayPal, which is also in there. I made a Funklit PayPal. It'll all be in the description. Links, all the links in the description.
And that's, first of all, this is the lady that gave him Excalibur.
It is.
All right. So even if she is asking for these awful favors, he does owe her. Right? There's a sense of responsibility to her. He's like, I can't do that one thing, but ask literally anything else. Anything but murder. Anything that doesn't violate my religion. And when you're the benefactor of somebody, you would assume you're under their protection.
Yeah, you can't go killing people that you owe favors to.
When you peacefully show up to petition a king,
and
even if you're not their benefactor, you would expect protection.
Yeah.
I'm here just to ask a favor. Don't murder me. So when Balin's like, nah, fuck that.
Because she did not come in violently. She was straight up. She's like, I'm not going to kill them.
Right.
I want you to do it.
Yeah. And that means petitioning the righteous authority to act or to enact justice on your behalf. Mm-hmm. She was doing it the right way. Mm-hmm. She said, I can't judge them. I'm asking you to, because you're the High King. You're the one anointed by God to lead. Mm-hmm. You should be the one to do it. And Arthur really sort of proves his right to that role by saying, no, I'm not going to do that.
I'm the king. I can't do that.
And so that's like, oh, he is a good, righteous king. So God made the right pick. Like, this is the right guy for that. But still, Arthur's rightfully pissed. She was under my protection. You can't do that while she's here. If you want to do that, fine. But wait till she leaves, because now it looks bad on me.
Yeah. He said that, and he's like, you've shamed me. You've shamed my court. You know, I was beholden to this lady. She came here under safe conduct. I shall never forgive you for this.
Yeah. And he exiles.
And Balin's like, sir, I despair of your displeasure, for this same lady was the untruest lady living. And by enchantment and sorcery, she has been the destroyer of many good knights. And she was the causer that my mother was burnt through her falsehood and treachery.
Yeah, Balin's got some strong feelings.
Balin's got some very strong feelings about killing the Lady of the Lake. Yeah. And so, you know, Arthur's mad. Balin is like, I had to.
Yeah, well, and it's important to note, Balin is regretful that Arthur is mad.
He is.
He's like, I'm sorry I made you mad, and I totally get why.
Yeah.
However, she is a huge cunt.
Yeah.
And really deserved the beheading. And if the stuff that Balin says is true, I get it. I think both sides are right here.
and then so Arthur's like, whatever the reason, you should have tolerated her in my presence.
Right.
Therefore, think not the contrary. You shall repent it, for I've never had such shameful conduct in my court. Therefore, withdraw you out of my court in all haste. Get out of here as soon as possible. Yep. Just get out.
So you gotta leave.
Fuck you.
You can't stay here. I've never been this embarrassed in public in my life. How dare you?
So Balin takes the Lady of the Lake's head.
Yep.
And goes to an inn.
Yep.
and there at the inn, he meets with his squire, who was also sorry that he had displeased King Arthur.
Well, you know, you don't like to make him mad.
Right.
He's a good guy. You don't want to disappoint him.
So Arthur and the squire, they rode out of town. And then Balin says, now we gotta depart. We gotta split up.
Yeah, we gotta leave.
You take this head, you show it to my friends, and you tell them how I have sped. And tell my friends in Northumberland that my worst foe is dead.
Yeah, he goes, go let everybody know that I won.
Also, tell them how I'm out of prison, and I got this cool sword.
Also very important.
And then the squire's like, alas, you are greatly to blame for King Arthur's displeasure. You know, the squire's like, I mean, okay, but what about this?
You really pissed him off,
and Balin's like, as for that, I will hurry to meet with King Rience and destroy him, or else I will die. And if I'm lucky enough to win, then King Arthur will be my good and gracious lord. So he's like, all right, I'll make it up to Arthur.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill King Rience.
I'm going to go find his greatest enemy, and I'm going to kill that son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the
honestly, solid plan. I mean, it's a good idea. If you want to get back in somebody's good graces.
I don't know what else he can do if that's the goal. Honestly, he should have just gone back to Northumberland.
Well, I think it's good that he is recognizing his responsibility for his wrongdoing.
He had to do it, he feels.
Yes, he felt obligated to do it, but he recognizes that the consequences of it are bad.
Yeah.
And that he's responsible for it. So this is him, in a medieval knightly way, being accountable to his actions. He's saying, I did upset Arthur, and that's fair. He should be upset with me. I can't just leave it at that. I owe him, and so this is what I can do to make up for that.
I'm gonna solve this King Rience problem.
Right. That's the other thing that's bothering him. I'll do him a favor to be in recompense for my actions.
And so, he tells the squire, let's split up. You go tell all my friends what happened. And the squire's like, where shall I meet you? And he says, in King Arthur's court.
Yeah.
So when we meet again, my name will be cleared, is what he's saying.
Yes.
They split up. They go do their thing. And meanwhile, King Arthur in the court, they're burying the Lady of the Lake, minus her head. I'm confused why they let him take the head.
It's not real clear. They may not have let him.
Oh, you think he
may have just absconded with it. That's really more what I think. But also, narratively, he has to have the head so that he can prove that she's dead.
I guess that quite a lot of his friends will be pleased to know this.
Yeah.
Anyways, chapter 4. Sure. How Merlin told the adventure of this damsel. So, at this point in the story, this is when we are introduced to a new character, Sir Lanceor, who is, am I saying that right?
I believe so. Lanceor.
Lanceor.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, this guy, he's a prideful knight, and he's the son of the King of Ireland, so he's a big deal.
Yeah.
So he was pretty mad at Balin, for getting the damsel's sword, and because, he believed that there was nobody hardier than him.
Yeah. He was one of those jealous knights.
Yeah. And so, in his jealousy... Sorry, what?
He's just thinking, I should have been the one to pull that fucking sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, presumably, he tried and failed.
You would assume. It really makes him look awful if he didn't even try. And he's jealous that Balin did and succeeded. Because then you're just like, what the fuck is your problem?
Yeah. So in his jealousy, he goes to Arthur, and he asks for if he can take his leave to go after Sir Balin and get revenge.
Yeah, he's asking for permission to enact revenge on Arthur's behalf.
And Arthur's like, do your best. I am so mad at that guy.
Fair. Fair.
And so Lanceor, he leaves. He goes to an inn, presumably not the same inn.
We would assume not. But maybe there's only one inn.
Maybe, I don't know. He goes to the inn that he was staying at. And while he's doing that, meanwhile, Merlin comes to King Arthur's court, where he is then told of the events of the preceding 3 chapters that just played out. And Merlin says to Arthur, this same damsel that stands here, that brought the sword unto your court, I'm going to tell you why she came here. She was the falsest damsel that lives. And the court's like, say it ain't so. And Merlin's like, it is so. She has a brother who is a knight, and this damsel loved another knight that loved her. And her brother met with this other knight, and slew him by force of his hands. And then when this false damsel found this out, she went to the Lady Lyle of Avelion and begged her help to be avenged on her own brother. So she wanted to get revenge for her brother's death.
Yeah.
That's the end of chapter 4. Chapter 5.
how Balin was pursued by Sir Lanceor, Knight of Ireland, and how he jousted and slew him.
So, I'm guessing the last chapter ended the way it did for dramatic effect, because the beginning of the next chapter is Merlin finishing his exposition.
Yeah.
He says, "This Lady Lyle gave the damsel the sword she brought, and told her no man shall draw it from the sheath, but one of the best knights of the realm. And with that sword he should slay her brother. This was the reason she came to court. If only by God she hadn't come to this court, for she did not come to do good, but great harm. The knight who wields that sword shall be destroyed by that sword, which is a shame, for there is no other knight living with more prowess than he is, and he shall give you, my lord Arthur, great honor and kindness. It is a great pity he shall die, for I don't know any who could match his strength and hardiness."
I mean, glowing review of Balin here.
Yeah.
It's like the best knight ever. Merlin himself is going, this guy was the bee's knees. Like, this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
And
It's a shame he's gonna die.
What a pity.
What a pity. So, meanwhile, Sir Lanceor, he armors up, gets a shield on his shoulder, mounts his horse, takes a spear in his hand, and rides off as fast as his horse can take him. And, with no time at all. Let's assume some time passes. He's got to chase down Balin.
Sometime, yeah.
They meet on a mountain where he sees Balin. I'm guessing, he just followed the trail that he assumed Balin was taking. Catches up with Balin, and he's like, "Abide, knight, for ye shall abide whether ye will or nill, and the shield that is tofore you shall not help." So he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna fight you, and your shield sucks."
And you have no choice. You cannot say no.
Right. And so Balin, he turns his horse around real quick, and he's like, "Fair knight, what will ye with me? Will ye joust with me?" And Sir Lanceor is like, "Yeah, therefore come I after you." And Balin's like, "Peradventure, it had better to have holden you at home, for many a man weeneth to put his enemy to a rebuke, and oft it falleth to himself. Of what court be ye sent from?" And Lanceor is like, "I am come from the court of King Arthur, that come hither for to revenge the despot ye did this day to King Arthur and to his court."
He said, "Why are you trying to fight me, bro?" He said, "King Arthur said, you ain't shit." And then they joust.
So before they joust, Balin says, "Well, I see well I must have ado with you, that me forethinketh for to grieve King Arthur, or any of his court. And your quarrel is full simple unto me, for the lady that is dead did me great damage, and else would I have been loath as any knight that liveth for to slay a lady." He's like, "Look, it's really unfortunate you saw me kill that lady."
Yeah, I didn't want to kill any lady. It's really a shame I had to kill a lady at all.
Yeah.
But I did have to kill that one.
And so Lanceor, he's not having any of this. He's
No, he didn't.
like, "Ready up. Let's go."
Square up, bro.
So they jousted. Sir Lanceor's spear hit Sir Balin's shield dead on. It did not penetrate. Sir Balin's spear went through Sir Lanceor's shield and his hauberk, which is like a chainmail shirt.
Mm-hmm.
So it went through his shield and his shirt, and pierced his body, and went through his horse's croup, which is, I looked it up, it's the horse's hindquarters. So the spear went through his body and through the horse's butt.
Yeah.
And then, Balin, this happened really quick, right? He wasn't sure that he dealt a killing blow. So he quickly turns around and draws out his sword.
Mm-hmm.
There was no need. Lanceor was dead.
Yeah. Before he hit the ground.
It was a really quick joust. Yeah.
I always feel bad for the horses in these kinds of situations.
Me too.
Because it's like,
The horse didn't ask for that.
there's no malice in a horse.
The horse is just jousting, man.
Not even conscious. It can't choose to be malicious. It's a horse.
Yeah. I will say, though, I may have talked about this in one of our prior Little Morte Arthur episodes. Horses are, fucking scary, dude.
You think so?
So, you know how, I learned this from a friend of mine who loves horses.
Mm-hmm.
she told me a little bit about the history of horses.
It's a horse girl.
She's a horse girl. But she had some interesting nuggets. She's an interesting horse girl.
Yeah.
So you know how horses, they do that cantering thing where they kind of trot in place?
Mm-hmm.
You know why horses do that?
No.
That is a trick that they were taught for war purposes, to kill people that were on the ground.
Yeah. Trample them. Yeah.
Trample them. That was straight up just like, no, we're going to train you to kill people like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's fucking scary, dude.
Yeah.
Getting trampled to death
I
by
find
horse.
horses very fascinating because they're so perceptive.
They are.
There is, and it's this phenomenon that, like, there's a reason that people that really like horses because they really do seem to have a personality.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, if you really get to know a horse, it feels like they are conscious.
I feel that way about my dog.
And it's just their ability to pick up on, you know, like you and your attitude and your mood and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah.
To the point where people really do think that horses can, like, read minds.
My mom loved
That's
horses.
how perceptive they are.
Yeah.
It's insane.
She convinced my dad to buy some horses to raise them with the idea in mind to sell them. That's the only reason she convinced my dad.
Haven't sold any of that.
Didn't sell a single one. Anyways, chapter 6.
How a damsel, which was love to Lancior, slew herself for love, and how Balin met with his brother Balin.
So, this is, it's really interesting timing, really. Like, I'm guessing what happened is this damsel heard about Sir Lancior's, intentions.
Yeah.
And went after him.
Yeah. Presumably to stop him.
Right. And so she, unfortunately, rode up, like, pretty immediately after the deed was done.
Like 20 seconds too late.
Yeah. And, you know, she saw that her love was dead, and she's like, "Oh, Balin, 2 bodies thou hast slain, and 1 heart, and 2 hearts in 1 body, and 2 souls thou hast lost." And so, you know, she gets off her horse, and she picks up Sir Lancior's sword, and then she falls to her knees in sorrow, you know, like she's about to do something horrible here, but she's really fucking sad, so she falls to her knees before she does it. Sir Balin, you know, was moved by her emotion. He goes to her, and then she stands, and he intending to take the sword from her hand, but she was holding on to it so tightly that he couldn't take it from her without hurting her in the process. So he didn't take it from her. And then, like, very suddenly, like, it happened really fast, she set the sword's pommel to the ground and just fell on it.
Yes.
Drove the sword through her body. Really fucking unfortunate. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah. And this, I think, narratively, is Balin's punishment for having killed a woman.
Yeah, probably.
Because there was this instance, Balin felt justified in killing a woman. The woman had very specifically done terrible things. He did it where it was inappropriate, and he did it very directly. And then didn't feel sorry for it.
No.
He was sorry it upset people, but he wasn't sorry that he did it.
No, not at all.
And so then in not allowing justified revenge, right, Arthur's vengeance in the form of Sir Lancior, then he's being punished again, now with this woman saying, "Well, I'm going to kill myself."
Yeah.
So Balin didn't want her to die.
No.
But couldn't stop her.
No.
And so there's this sort of, moral punishment.
So this is the interesting thing, though, right? Because he could have stopped her.
Right, but the point is that he couldn't have without hurting her.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to hurt her.
He did not want to hurt her. Nope.
He said, no, I don't want to hurt women. I just wanted to hurt that very specific woman.
She killed my mom, dude.
Right, and he made that point. It was like, it's a shame that I had to kill a woman at all.
Yeah.
But I really did have to kill that one.
She killed my mom.
And so now we come to the point where he doesn't even want to harm her in the slightest, to the point where it's like, I can't take the sword away from her.
Mm-hmm.
Which ends in for killing herself, and Balin feeling personally responsible.
Justifiably, it was a very upsetting thing to witness.
Yeah, it'd be very traumatic.
He was very ashamed that this lady killed herself because he killed, her lover.
Right.
And
where he didn't really have a choice other than to let himself be killed.
Yeah. And he says, alas, me repenteth sore the death of this knight, for the love of this damsel, for there was much true love betwixt them both. And so then, interesting timing again, he turns, he looks towards the forest nearby, where he sees his brother Balin. And the brothers met, they took off their helmets, they kissed one another, and they wept for joy and pity. And then Balin says, I doubted I would find you here. I'm so glad you're out of prison, for a man told me in the castle of 4 stones that you were released, and that man had seen you in the court of King Arthur, so I came into this country hoping to find you. I didn't think I'd find you here, but awesome, I'm glad I found you. And, so Balin tells his brother the story of how he got, a cool new sword, and how he killed the lady of the lake. Hey, yeah. And, how King Arthur was really mad about that. And then he says, he sent this knight after me, and he gestures at Sir Lanceor's corpse. And, the death of this damsel grieves me. And Balin says, me too, but you must take the adventure that God will ordain you.
Mm-hmm.
And Balin says, truly, it weighs heavily on me that my lord Arthur is displeased with me, for he is the most worshipful knight that reigns now on earth. And for his love will I get, or else will I put my life in adventure. For the King Rience lieth at the castle Terrabil, and thither will we draw in all haste to prove our worship and prowess upon him. And Balin says, I will well that we do, and we will help each other as brethren ought to do.
So Balin's like, well, I'm really upset that Arthur doesn't like me, and I'm going to go kill this king for him. And Balin is like, yeah, I'll help you. We're brothers. Like, that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if your text mentions it, but mine did. At the setting out of these two, Balin makes the point to avow himself the foremost to the service of women.
I believe that comes up in the next chapter or two.
Okay, yeah. So it's after this woman commits suicide in front of him, and he feels awful about it.
Well, we're not done with the woman yet.
Oh, we're not.
That's the next chapter.
Okay.
Chapter 7. How a dwarf reproved Balin for the death of Lanceor, and how King Mark of Cornwall found them and made a tomb over them.
So yeah, the brothers were in agreement about what they gotta do, but before they leave, these two bodies, a dwarf, coming from Camelot, riding on horseback, he comes across the scene.
Mm-hmm.
He sees the brothers, he sees the dead bodies, and he grabs his hair in shock. He's like, which one of you did this? And Balin is like, what do you mean by asking? And the dwarf's like, I would know it.
He said, what's it your business? He goes, shut up and tell me. All right, fair enough. That's a good argument.
So Balin explains that he slew the knight because the knight challenged him, and
fair
it
enough.
was either him or the knight.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a duel. That happens.
And then the damsel killed herself for love of him, and which repenteth me, and for her sake I shall owe all women the better love. So this is where he makes the oath to the dwarf.
Yes. So he's saying, I feel really bad about it. I'm taking responsibility for it. Because of that, for the rest of my life, I will do everything I can to help women.
That's right.
A fair oath. Good job, Balin.
Fair oath.
You should do that. You should have already been, but that's all right.
Jesus Christ.
Some people gotta learn.
So the dwarf is like, alas, thou hast done great damage to yourself. For this knight that is here dead was one of the most valiant men that lived. And trust well, Balin, the kin of this knight will chase you through the world till they have slain you. Balin's like, as for that, I fear not greatly, but I am right heavy that I have displeased my lord King Arthur for the death of this knight.
Yeah, like the family of this knight's gonna get revenge. I don't give a fuck about that.
That's
I am a little depressed that King Arthur's upset. I don't like that. But this knight and his family, 0 fucks.
As the brothers and the dwarf were talking about this, another character enters the scene. The King of Cornwall.
That's right.
His name's Mark.
He'll be important, much more important later.
So Mark comes up and he sees the three talking around these two dead bodies and reacts pretty similarly to the dwarf. He's like, "What happened?"
Yeah.
And so they
very reasonable reaction to coming on this scene.
And so, same interaction. They're like, "This happened,"
Yeah.
And then, King Mark, hearing all of this, he says, "I will not depart till I have buried these two."
King Mark's a good man.
So, it's unclear to me if the brothers and the dwarf assisted King Mark, but the text refers to them as they.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm inclined to believe at least the brothers helped him.
Yeah.
I choose to think it was all 4 of them. They go on this little adventure to find a suitable tomb for the dead couple. So they find a nearby church with a suitable tomb, and King Mark buried the two, in the tomb. And on the tomb, he wrote, "How here lieth Lanceor, the king's son of Ireland, that at his own request was slain by the hands of Balin, and how his lady, Columbe," Colombe. I don't know how you would pronounce that.
I'm not sure.
How his lady and paramour slew herself with her love's sword for dole and sorrow. So I think that dole is just a synonym for sorrow.
I'm not sure. I don't know what dole means.
Dole. Yeah, I looked it up. I don't remember what I found, but as I recall, it was a synonym for sorrow, basically. All right, cool. So this is gonna be the end of part 1. We're gonna go ahead and wrap.
All right.
Next time.
What a downer ending.
Yeah.
I mean, at least King Mark came by and had him buried. That's good.
That is good.
That's good.
Yeah.
King Mark is a good dude. Some bad stuff happens to him later, and it's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
But as far as I recall, he didn't really do anything to deserve it.
I don't know. I haven't got that far yet.
Poor guy.
But good introduction for Mark. Gives a good first impression. He sees a dead couple in the road, and he's like, "Well, I gotta bury him."
Yeah, and he had no reason to have to do that. He wasn't obligated to do
he
that.
could have just
Presumably, the tomb
on.
cost money. You don't just get those for free.
Yeah.
So, anyway, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Damn, Balin.
and Balin's made his new vow to treat women better
and kill King Rience for Arthur.
I told my wife, I was the whole time I was reading through this, it took me a while.
Mm-hmm.
And every chapter I would share with my wife at lunch, because, we have lunch together at work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we work in the same building, but we don't work together. We just have lunch. It's cute. And so I would tell her this story, and she, everything that I told her, she was just like, "Why is Balin hating on these women? What is wrong with him?" And so I got to this part and told her how, he resolved to treat women better. And she was like, "Well, that's the bare minimum."
Well, I don't see this as Balin hating on women. Now, he did take the sword from the maiden and didn't give it back.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was
he did kill a lady.
I don't think he didn't give it back because she was a woman. I don't think he was like, "Nah, fuck you, lady. You can't have it back." He really just didn't want to give up the sword.
Yeah, he's just like, "Nah, this sword's cool. I want it."
Anybody could have asked him to give it back, and he just said no. And it turns out that woman was awful anyway.
Apparently, according to Merlin. Balin doesn't know that.
Yeah, no, Balin doesn't. But really, more or less, he didn't just be like, "You're a lady and you're asking me something, so no."
Yeah.
He kills a lady, but not because she's a lady. He's not like, he specifically says it's sad that she's a lady. Yeah. And boy, he wished she wasn't, but you know, you're the reason my mom is dead. And presumably you sent your brother to kill me and I just won. And now you're really butthurt about that. And that's really not on me. And so he beheads her. I feel justified.
The common trend I'm seeing here is he is not taking proper accountability for his own actions here.
There are moments of selfishness, like when he keeps the sword, when he kills the Lady of the Lake in Arthur's presence. He didn't think about how that would look on Arthur.
Yeah.
He just did it because, like, well, it's what I want. When he chooses not to take the sword away from the woman. I struggle to call that selfish.
So
but in a sense, he really could have done something to stop her.
This is the thing
and he chose not to.
That I was wondering about, because I was thinking, like, I feel like in this moment, a slightly more villainous or treacherous man would have just yanked the sword out of her hand, not cared about hurting her.
Right.
And in so doing, would have actually saved her life in that moment.
Yes, but see, we get into this weird semantic thing where it's like, does he care more because he wishes not to hurt her at all? Or less because rather than temporarily injure her, he allowed her to kill herself? Because you could also argue that he's choosing to hold his own ideal of how he should treat women over the actual outcome for women.
Yeah.
If he had temporarily disregarded her autonomy to take the sword away from her,
to prevent her from killing herself.
in the short term, you go, wow, you're not respecting her choices. That's awful.
But in the long term, this lady didn't commit suicide.
Right. In the long term, it's like, well, I don't want to respect your choice to kill yourself. I don't like that choice. Yeah. And if it means you're going to be alive tomorrow, fuck your choices.
Right.
So there's a strong argument made one way or the other, depending on how far along you want to take this argument.
I just think it's interesting. What do you think, audience? Do you think what do you think Balin should have done?
Yeah, was he right to not take the sword away from her? Yeah. I think you also get into a weird spot though with like Balin is holding himself responsible, and is he?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Because if you say, well, yeah, he should have taken the sword away. There's a lot of very sensitive discussions you have to have there about people, around individuals that have committed suicide.
Yeah.
What level of responsibility should they have for that? I have plenty of friends that have killed themselves.
Right.
I don't hold myself personally responsible for doing that.
And I don't think you should.
That would be awful.
That was a choice that, unfortunately,
they
made.
So what level of responsibility do we ascribe to Balin here?
Right.
For this woman killing herself?
I don't know. It's a good question. Like I said, audience, let us know. I'm going to put a thing up in Spotify, because apparently, you can have a little Q&A on Spotify.
Yeah. That's really cool.
For the first episode, I set up a Q&A. You can only do one question. But I think that's a good question for this episode.
Yeah.
And you can do a poll, too. I don't know what the poll for this episode would be. But for the first episode, I was like, hey, what was your favorite story?
Yeah. So the question could be, is Balin responsible for this woman's death? Yeah.
I don't know what the poll would be.
I'm not sure.
But anyways, yeah. So thank you to Digistory Productions for the equipment that we use to record this podcast. Thank you to Midwest Studios for providing us some of the other equipment that we use, and for the space that we're using. We're recording in the studio today. Usually we're recording in Zach's library. Not today.
The missus didn't want to get up early enough. I don't blame her.
Yeah. So thank you to Chris. He's our sound guy.
Thanks, Chris.
We appreciate and love you, Chris. And thank you to Jake Weller for all of the music that you heard in this episode.
It's so good.
I know.
I've never met Jake, but he's a talented individual.
He sure is. He's great. He taught me how to use Reaper to edit this podcast.
Well, I imagine he's got some good sound editing skills.
He sure does.
Based on what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually this is a bit of a tangent, but it's a short one.
Sure.
I am in awe of musicians in general.
Yeah.
I am not a musically inclined individual.
Mm-hmm.
I was in band in middle school, but I was a percussionist. So music reading, not my forte. I can hold the beat, I can do the rhythm, but the minute you start talking about scales and notes, you lost me.
Damn.
They'd be like, that's an A. I'd be like, I'll take your word for that. I don't know where that sits on the scale. And they'd be like, right there. All right, I'm not going to remember that.
Yeah.
So musicians have always impressed me. I think it's an incredible talent to have, and I'm very jealous that I don't have it.
Hear that, Jake? You're impressive. Audience, if you like our music, listen to Jake's album, Wasting Time. It's on Spotify, and served as inspiration for our intro and outro. You might be able to pick out which song the inspiration came from. Yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.